This is WordPress Plugins A to Z.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you happen to be hiding out there on the globe today. Welcome to another training video from WP Plugins A to Z.com. I'm John Overall, and I'm here today to discuss with you the PowerPress Podcasting plugin by Blubrry. This is what we're going to be showcasing today, and we're going to be showcasing how it can be used, a lot of the settings in it. This is a plugin that was initially first reviewed by me back in December 15, 2011 on episode 53 of the WP Plugins A to Z podcast. And I figured it was time to re-review it and to create a bit of a training video about how to use it, and especially since it's had so many advances in the last few years. And most of the time I've just been doing the updates and I've not been following with the advances, so it was time for me to update my own websites with all of the new features of this plugin. So anyway, follow along as we go through this and start to showcase everything that this plugin does. So first off, what we'll do is we will show you a bit, the easy bit. First, how to install it. Of course, everyone knows how to install a WordPress plugin. You go into your dashboard area, go into add new plugins, and then search for Blubrry PowerPress. And then click install now, since it should show up as the #1 plugin up there. Then once you've got it installed, simply activate it. And then after you activate it, you're going to get a new menu item down here on the side for PowerPress. And when you click on that, it's going to take you directly to the dashboard settings. Okay, so once it's installed and activated, and after it's activated, you head into the settings menu, and the settings menu comes in two forms. It starts off in the simple form, and this is usually a good place to get started with it. You can go down through here, set up your basic podcast settings, the program title. If you leave it blank, it'll use your blog site title or your website title. You can get your iTunes settings here for an iTunes subtitle that'll go in here, the iTunes summary, so you can get the summary all set up in here, and then you can also wrap the summary in a seed data tag. Category, you can go choose from a category in iTunes that you want your plugin to be in. Then you can determine whether your content on here is going to be explicit, clean, or no option. Leaving it as no option allows you to set the option on a per podcast basis, because you never know. Sometimes you might slip up, and most of the time you might keep it clean. Your iTunes email, the email address you use when your podcast is accepted into the iTunes directory. And then the iTunes type. And this one's kind of a new. This allows you to create episodic episodes of your podcast. For instance, if unlike us, that we do a general weekly podcast all around WordPress, maybe you've got a podcast that is storytelling, and you've got 3 episodes of a particular type of story, and that's the end of it. And then you start a new set of episodes around a new story type. So you can set that up there in episodic or serials. A new thing that's happening in the podcast world. Then you'll want to get your iTunes art image, your default art image here, and set up on the site. And you'll want to specifically pay attention to the sizing for iTunes. They want a minimum 1400 by 1400 pixel image. And in what I've heard a lot of is you really want to create the 3000 by 3000 image. Now, I know it's huge, but you need to create it as a JPEG in RGB color space, or iTunes is going to ignore it and not use it correctly. So you'll want to pay attention to that when you're creating your artwork. Very important. And you can upload an image right here if you like. Your blog posts and pages display the media links, and I'll showcase on how that looks on my site here in a little bit. And you'll determine I prefer to put it above the page content. You can put it below the page content, or you can disable it. But disabling the player seems like a really silly thing to do if you've got a podcast. And if you're having issues, they've got a automatic try to fix it thing. And this is something that I have had to use in the past when using certain themes on podcast websites. In particular, it's probably been a long time, maybe it's no longer a problem. Once upon a time, Genesis used to have a conflict. And by using the fix it fixed the problems of loading different things. And then there's the advanced options down here. And it comes with the default options already set to import to podcast, migrate to media, podcasting SEO, audio player. But you can also set up a couple other ones, such as custom podcast channels. This allows you to have multiple media files and or formats in one blog post. For example, say you do a podcast that is both audio and visual. This allows you to set up both of them on one blog post. Or if you have a podcast that comes in multiple audio formats, be it WAV, MP3, AVI, whatever it's going to be, you can set that up. Category podcasting is another use for one. I used to run a website that I had 2 different podcasts that were in 2 different genres. And I ran them both from the same website, but I ran them in different categories on the website. This allowed me to make sure that my podcasts were going up on the same website and being stuffed and fed to iTunes in a unique channel, in a unique feed. Kind of a useful thing if you've got more than one podcast. Meta marks, this is to add meta information for syndication. Taxonomy podcasts, so you can feature it via taxonomies. Post type podcasting, manage multiple media files and or formats to specific post types. And then the PowerPress player list. This here allows you to create playlists for your podcast and then display them on your website. And this is something that came in, a couple of years ago, I believe, maybe a few years back. And I don't think I've ever used it, but we will try and showcase how that works. Then you can also link to your Blubrry account. Now, the nice thing about Blubrry is you don't have to become a hosting user at Blubrry to be able to access their basic statistics. Kind of a useful thing to have so you can get some basic statistics on the downloads of your podcast. And it's a useful thing to have. It allows you to create an account there, then link it to your website, and then you can start collecting statistics on the number of downloads that you get in per show. Okay, once you get to the bottom of this, hit Save Changes, and then go back up to the top. Now, one of the things I do, I'm not big on the simple mode. I usually switch to the advanced mode because it gives you so many more options here to start playing with everything. Now, if you're a single podcaster, the advanced mode is probably what you'll want to use to set it up, because then you can set so many more details in here. You can go through and set up episodes, go through on it per episode and determine what boxes will show up every time you create an episode. And there's quite a few boxes down through here for you to consider checking. You can check up an embed field to allow an embed code to automatically be created that people can then embed your podcast onto their website. You can display the player and links options that will show up when you're creating a post. You can specify different artwork per episode by using the poster image. You can set the player width and height on a per episode basis. You can set the iTunes subtitle field on a per episode. You can set the iTunes summary field on a per episode. You can set the iTunes author field on a per episode. You can set the iTunes explicit field on a per episode. You can set the iTunes image field on a per episode. And then you can set closed captions if you want. And then you can override the iTunes order. Now, this is a useful one if you happen to create a podcast that you want to stick at the top of your feed in iTunes, so that when people find you for the first time, there's always one show that's at the top of the field. Maybe you create an introduction to what your show is all about and why people should listen to you. You can stick that at the top of the feed. Or if you want to mess with other things, there's a lot you can do with it. The iTunes episode title field, this is to override the iTunes title per episode. The episode number, season, and type field. This is the featured episode in iTunes and Google Play Music. This is to feature an episode for a short period of time. And then you got the Google Play description and the Google Play explicit field. Now they do have a couple other advanced blocks here, and these blocks are to allow you to block out an episode and prevent it from appearing in either iTunes or Google Play. Maybe you've got an episode that you record once, put in the feed for a while, and then you want to have it removed from the feed. You can go back and then block that episode so that it doesn't show up in the iTunes or the Google Play field. Now, it could still appear in other directories, but anyone who supports the block tag, it will automatically get blocked. Okay. Now, we can also showcase advanced options here. File size, it'll auto-detect, or you can specify. Leave the auto-detection, trust me, best thing to do. Auto-detect duration, same thing. Add media file, and on this one here, the auto-add media file, what happens is it will automatically search your site or your post for a media link, and it will stick the first media link found in the post content into the media player. Now, this could be a good thing if you only put one media file per post, but if you use multiple media files, this could be problematic. So you'll want to think about that one before you use it. And then disable warnings is to disable the warning messages displayed in episode entry box. Errors are always displayed, so you can use this for debugging. Then the final thing here is permalinks. It's best to use the default WordPress behavior unless you're looking to do some serious customizations. So we get that, and then we save changes. Next up here is the service stats. Now, this is where you connect to your Blubrry account. And once you have a Blubrry account, you can configure, it'll walk you through the steps. They give you a redirect URL, which you'll paste here. I'll showcase how that looks when we get to showing how this is set up on a live site. The website info, this is your website settings. You enable the PowerPress media players and links. You can disable them if you want, but I wouldn't recommend it unless you're going to use your own customized player. The blog posts, this is where you'll want to put the players above the page content. So as they're scrolling down, it's the first thing they see instead of seeing it at the end of the post. You can disable the player and links and hide the player and links. You want to read more about that before you do it. The media players, display the media player. You can uncheck that. The media links, display the player in the new window. Now, these are things that you can allow to be shown, and we'll showcase how that looks on a live site before long here. And then the subscribe links. Now, if you uncheck that, check it, keep it checked, to display links, you can give it a label to subscribe, and then it's automatic for iTunes, automatic for Android, but you can also allow it for RSS, subscribe by email, subscribe in Google Play, subscribe on Stitcher, subscribe on TuneIn. So these are the ways you can get to these different areas. Okay. Now, if you want to create a page that will also show that they can find out more about your site, you can either choose the page you've created or send it to a specific URL. This is a useful way to help encourage people to find out more about your show and how they can donate to it or support you. Okay, and then you can create a subscribe page from template. They got that information here to help you get it all set up. PowerPress shortcodes. This is the shortcode to allow you to embed your player on any page or post. And how I use this is to embed this into things such as my transcript page and other things. I can embed the player there for the episode. Very useful shortcode. Okay, then you can enable the PowerPress playlist player. That's a lot of freaking P's. Wow. It's like seashores on the sea. Can't even do that one. Got to work on my tongue twisters. Okay. And then they've got the playlist shortcode and the PowerPress subscribe shortcode. These are shortcodes you can stick anywhere on your website to help encourage people to work on your site. Now, if you go open up one of those, you can then go see they've got a list of all the details that can go into the shortcodes. So they've made it quite easy for you to deal with here. And again, if you're having issues, you can adjust that here. And then when you play in a new window settings, you can force the window to be smaller window instead of a full-blown browser window. Okay, once you've got all that, make sure you save the changes on it. Next item in the list here is the feeds and what you'll want to do for the feeds. You can enhance all feeds, which is recommended. It adds podcasting support to all feeds, or you can just to the main feed only. Best to leave it on all feeds because you never know where you might stick a feed. Podcast feeds, special podcast only feeds. This is your website's main feed for the podcast, and it's the only podcast feed suitable for submission. These are podcast-only feeds suitable for submission to podcast directories such as iTunes. Okay, and then you can set to allow to not allow other plugins to modify the podcast feeds. And then you can also set it to accelerate the feed. Feed discovery include podcast feed links and HTML headers. It adds feed discovery links to your site's headers, allowing web browsers and feed readers to auto-detect your podcast feeds. Sounds like something I need to update because I don't remember that being there when I set mine up. Your feed settings. On your feed settings, these are the settings that apply specifically to your feed. And this is where you set your show title, your description, the number of episodes to showcase in the feed. Now, this number of episodes is something kind of important to have, especially as you get up there in the number of episodes. One of the things you'll notice if you find us on iTunes, you'll notice that we only have the last 60 episodes listed in iTunes. And that is because I limited the feed to not have all 319 episodes that we have currently for the show. So this keeps the feed from being too long, plus it keeps from overwhelming people in iTunes. Plus, one of the things that happens after you've been doing this a while, you kind of want to forget about those first 50 or so episodes, because when you go back and listen to them, you think, really? I said that? Oh my God, what the hell was I thinking? Anyway. Okay, so feed episode maximizer, maximize number of episodes while maintaining optimal feed size. Feed language, you can change the language for your feed or leave it with the default. Your copyright information for the feed, debugging comments, basic show locations such as where it's located, how often you put out a show, and then syndicate a donate link. And that's new, so that's something I do need to update too, so people can donate to the show. Remember, donate to the WP plugins at wppluginsa2z.com/donate. Okay, and then TV settings. Now, this is where you can set a rating on your show so that people find it. If you happen to have a show, ours is obviously G, which is general audience. Or if you're a mature audience show, you can set your rating here for that as a mature audience show. After you've got that, save all the settings. Then you can go into the iTunes, and this is where you'll put all your iTunes information. And a lot of this information you'll need to set up in iTunes first, but you'll need to create your first post before you can submit to iTunes. So you'll be coming back to this page after you've created your first podcast. And the same with Google Play. All of your information here for Google Play. And then the artwork page. This is where you put your iTunes artwork and your Google Play artwork. And then destinations. And the destinations on here this is where you put your destinations such as your iTunes subscription URL, your Google Play subscription URL, your Blubrry podcast URL, your Stitcher Radio URL, and then TuneIn. TuneIn is something new. I'm going to have to look into that one and get our show there. So, at any rate, those are all the basic settings for this. And what we'll do next is we will go into some live sites, a couple of them that I have, the WP Medic show and the WP Plugins A to Z, and show you how this is set up on those two particular websites. All right, we'll do a little showcasing here on WP or on the WordPress Medic show and website at wpmedic.ca. And this was a show I did. I managed to get 13 episodes, and then I got too busy with life to be able to keep up 2 podcasts or 3. I think at that time I was doing 4 podcasts. They can suck up a lot of your life, trust me. just the WP Plugins A to Z show sucks up a fair chunk of my week. So at any rate, just to showcase a bit about it, first off, we'll showcase how it's used on this website here. Now, I haven't updated this one in quite some time, but it's good to see what was done in the past. Now, when you see this show, as you scroll down for the post that has all the podcast in it, you'll notice one of the things unusual is it's got a player here with a great big button. This is one of the options that you can choose in the settings. And then when they click on it,
Back
it automatically
once
switches
again
over to a player and starts playing. And then they've got a link to play it in a new window or to download the episode or to subscribe at Apple Podcast, Android, RSS, and more. And then, of course, all the show notes. Now, in the settings section of this, what this has in here and where that's at is when you go down to your PowerPress menu, you'll see a spot for the audio player. I didn't cover that in the previous one, but we'll showcase that here because you get to choose multiple audio players when you're setting the site up. And you'll see here that the first one you can choose is Blubrry Audio Player. Very nice, fancy audio player that people can fast forward, rewind, on and on. But to do that, you have to be a Blubrry hosting customer. You can't use that one unless you're using Blubrry for your story. Now, the one I most commonly use is this one here, the Media Elements JS Media Player. It's an HTML5 compliant player, plays audio and video. And this one here is a nice big long bar, very simple. It's got a bar that people can slide back and forth. That's pretty much how they can go back and forth in it. On this particular site, I chose the HTML5 audio player where you can customize the button. When you click on Activate and Configure for it, takes you to a page that you can then create a unique button that you will use and showcase it, or you can leave it blank to have a default one there. In this site here, I must have had some time, so I went through the effort of creating a button. The last one is the one pixel out player. This one's being removed from PowerPress, so don't bother selecting it. They've got a big warning against that right here. So ignore that one. So anyway, that's what you would do for the player component of the site. Now, when we drop in here to go check out the settings on this particular site, on the WP Medic site, we find that some of the settings I've got here is I have all of the boxes checked here so I can get all the information. I'll showcase a bit about how that looks in a live post. On episodes, I don't have all the boxes checked. I didn't check the posters. Well, that probably came out after I set this site up. I didn't set to display player and links options. And I didn't have the iTunes episode title and on in here. Service and stats, obviously I have it connected to Blubrry statistics. Website information, have the player appear above the page contents, and then some of the other things I've got the subscribe links set up on it. Not all of them, but I need to get those, come back to this one when I make this podcast live again, hopefully sometime in the next few months. Feeds, this is where I have the feeds all enhanced and set much like before. iTunes settings, now the iTunes settings you'll see is blank here, and that is because in this particular site, I set it up to be using podcast category podcasting, and I'll show you how that works in a moment. And Google Play, this podcast is not on Google Play, so there's no settings here for it. And the artwork, again, will show you the other settings for that, because you won't want to have anything in the main settings here if you're going to use category or taxonomy podcasting or post type podcasting. You won't want to put anything here because it confuses Google or confuses iTunes when you do that. I found that out by accident when, for some reason, I have a podcast listed twice in iTunes, and I have no idea how it happened. I just live with it. Okay, so let's move on to showcase a bit about the category podcasting, because I'm pretty sure that's how I have this site set up, as category podcasting. I do. Here it is, category podcasting. So I created a category for WordPress Medic Podcast, and it gets its own feed. Now, if you go click on the edit for this, this is where you will do all of your stuff for iTunes, FeedBurner, all of it in here. Customize up where your podcast is shown, basic information, the parental settings, etc., etc. This is where you put all of your stuff for iTunes that goes into the iTunes settings. And this is where if you get to Google Play, you put it in here. Artwork is also done in here. Website information, destinations, all the same settings, but you want to put them here in the category area. So again, to use that, all you got to do is get your website to cooperate with you. There you go. Once it's cooperating with you. Okay, so when you click on category podcasting, you can go in here. You can add it to an existing category feed. Select whatever category you have. You go create your category. This makes it very easy to manage and maintain your podcast and keep it in a unique space on your website. Especially as I've discovered, websites tend to grow and evolve, and you add new categories and information and stuff starts to overlap in places. This is one way to help keep that mess from getting completely out of hand. Okay. Okay, and now we've got in here, we've gone through the audio player, video player I don't use. If you're a video podcaster, this is where you can go in and select your own video player to use. But generally, most people use iTunes for all their, use YouTube for all their video. So you probably won't touch this one, but you never know. So you might check it out just in case. Now, again, taxonomy podcasting, post type podcasting, very similar to category podcasting. Pretty much exactly the same. Select a category or taxonomy, or select a post type. And this is if you've got custom post types, you know, what types of posts. So very useful if you want to create them that way. MP3 tags. You'll want to deal with these. These are MP3 tags that are added to your post. And you'll want to customize these up a little bit. I haven't done mine yet. They're all at defaults. So you'll want to read through what each one of them does and then how to specify them and tweak it to get the most out of your MP3 ID tags. And these are tags that are then fed to podcast players or MP3 players, no matter what they're listening to. So that information goes into the player so people can either view it or hear it or look it up. So check into doing that. Now, if you need additional help, you'll want to go click down to the tools menu. And when you get to the tools menu, you'll see that they've got lots of resources, a podcasting manual, resources, update services, ping sites, find and replace media, etc., etc. So you'll want to check this information out for any expansions you want to do to your website. So the final one we've got here is migrate media. And migrate media, this allows you to migrate media to Blubrry if you're going to be hosting with them, to a media hosting account. So for example, if I wanted to move all my podcasts to Blubrry's podcast media hosting account, I could do that here and go through and add media files to migrate up to it. So we'll just real briefly select media migrate, comes through MP3 files. It found all 13 of my podcasts, and then just boom, request migration, and off you go. Bob's your uncle. Okay, and then import a podcast. This allows you to import from other sources, like from SoundCloud. Say you've been sticking all your audio up at SoundCloud. Now it's time to get control of it, or Libsyn, or Podbean, or Squarespace, or anywhere else out there. They've got quite a few different options here for importing your podcast into your own website for those of you that have been using a third-party source of some sort. Okay, now we're going to pop over to where this plugin is most used by me over on the WP Plugins A to Z site. So if we pop into the WP Plugins A to Z site and we look here at the settings, we'll take a note that I don't have as many options down here in the PowerPress menu bar as you saw over at WP Medic. I learned how to limit what I was going to do. In this particular site here, I don't have category podcasting. I have it set up direct as a solid one because I know there's only going to be one show on this website, no more, no less. So we need to find out where I put all my info. I don't have it here. Oh no. Oh, I put it up on a per episode basis. All right, well, scratch that last bit because I forgot that this podcast is also fed from a different spot. So at any rate, what we're going to showcase here is a bit about how I use this on a per post basis and the tweaks and other bits and pieces that you can do with it. And so what we're going to do, all right, to showcase a bit about how I use this on the WP Plugins A to Z site, I'll show you one of the most recent shows that went up. We put the media URL in. It auto-detected the file size and the running time of the show. The poster image, I create a poster image for each and every episode that gets placed in here. While iTunes doesn't always seem to detect it, I think I need to work on tweaking it because I've been using PNG files, and I only recently in the last few months found out that it prefers JPEGs. So I'll be tweaking that to see how it can go. Put an iTunes subtitle in here, an iTunes summary in here, a Google Play description in here, the iTunes author, and of course the show is nice and clean, so there is no explicit tag added to it. And then the iTunes image, a separate image from the poster image, the artwork that shows up in players and other places. Okay, and once you've got that information in here, that's all you have. And then how it displays on a website. Now, one of the things you can do, and to showcase this, is that when the show is up on a site, it will display a player, and then you've got the player across here, and then it'll play in a new window. And then you can also CSS the tags for the subscribe to information. Tweak that so that it stands out a bit more. There's a lot of miscellaneous things you can do with this player, but I think we've pretty much covered up all of the basic settings, how it functions for you, and what it can do for you. Any further questions, feel free to get a hold of me. Check the box below for the, let's get there it is. Check the box below for all of the further information for the show, the notes on this, where you can find stuff, all of that great thing. So thanks a lot for listening, and please support WP Plugins A to Z podcast.